You're walking through an empty shopping mall at closing time. The fountain still bubbles softly in the center court, but the stores have pulled down their metal gates with gentle metallic whispers. Fluorescent lights hum overhead, casting that peculiar glow that makes everything feel both familiar and strange. Your footsteps echo differently here. Not quite the sharp click of busy daytime shopping, but a softer, more contemplative sound that seems to stretch into the vast, quiet spaces around you. This is a liminal space, a threshold between what was and what will be, between busy and empty, between day and night. Scientists have discovered that humans are naturally drawn to these in-between places, these pauses in the rhythm of daily life. Psychologists call it the liminal effect. Our brains actually process these transitional spaces differently, often triggering feelings of nostalgia, contemplation, and sometimes an inexplicable sense of both comfort and unease. Tonight on Midnight Deep Dive, we're exploring the mysterious world of liminal spaces. Those threshold places that exist between here and there, between one state of being and another. From ancient sacred doorways to modern airport terminals, from misty forest clearings to empty parking lots under streetlights. These spaces hold a unique power over the human imagination. So settle in, find that perfect position where your body can truly relax, and let yourself drift peacefully as we uncover the hidden poetry of in-between places. Long before we had a word for liminal spaces, our ancestors understood their power. In the soft light of dawn, when night hadn't quite surrendered to day, early humans recognized something sacred in these moments of transition. They built their most important ceremonies around thresholds, literally and figuratively marking the passages between one state of being and another. The word liminal comes from the Latin limen, meaning threshold. But to truly understand what this means, imagine standing in an ancient doorway carved from stone thousands of years ago. Your hand rests on worn granite that countless others have touched before you. Behind you lies the familiar world you know. Ahead stretches something new, unknown, full of possibility. In this moment, you exist in both places and neither. You are suspended in pure potential. Ancient cultures around the world recognized certain places as naturally liminal. Crossroads held special significance, not just as meeting points of paths, but as intersections of possibilities. Celtic traditions spoke of thin places where the boundary between our world and the other world grew gossamer fine. Greek mythology placed great importance on thresholds, with Hermes serving as the god of boundaries and transitions, guiding souls between worlds. Consider the ancient practice of building temple doorways that were deliberately disorienting. Visitors would enter through passages that gradually narrowed, or chambers that required them to turn multiple corners before reaching the sacred space. These architectural choices weren't arbitrary. They were designed to create a sense of transition, of leaving ordinary consciousness behind and entering something transcendent. The Romans understood this so well that they had a god specifically for doorways and beginnings. Janus, with his two faces looking both forward and backward, simultaneously seeing what was and what could be. January, named for this deity, marks our own annual passage through time's most significant threshold. Every New Year's Eve, we collectively experience what our ancestors knew instinctively, that some moments exist outside ordinary time, suspended between past and future. Even our language preserves this ancient understanding. We speak of crossing thresholds when we mean entering new phases of life. Brides are traditionally carried across thresholds. We stand at the threshold of new opportunities. These aren't just metaphors. They're echoes of humanity's deep, intuitive understanding that certain spaces hold transformative power. Archaeological evidence shows that humans have been marking thresholds for over 40,000 years. Cave paintings often appear near entrances, marking the transition from outside to inside, from ordinary world to sacred space. Stone circles like Stonehenge create artificial thresholds in open landscape, framing views of sky and horizon in ways that emphasize the passage of time and season. Indigenous cultures worldwide developed elaborate rituals around threshold crossing. Vision quests often involved journeying to liminal places, mountaintops, desert edges, forest clearings, where the familiar world felt distant and new insights could emerge. These weren't just spiritual practices, they recognized something psychologists now study scientifically, that certain environments naturally alter consciousness and promote introspection. The ancient understanding of thresholds extended beyond physical spaces to temporal ones. Dawn and dusk, the changing of seasons, the dark of the moon. These were recognized as liminal times when ordinary rules seemed suspended. Festivals often celebrated these temporal thresholds, marking them as special occasions when communities could come together to acknowledge change and transformation. What's remarkable is how this ancient wisdom aligns with modern psychological research. Studies show that people in transitional physical spaces often experience heightened creativity, increased introspection, and altered time perception. Our ancestors didn't need fMRI machines to understand what we're only now beginning to measure scientifically: that certain places and times naturally invite transformation. Religious traditions across the world have always understood the profound spiritual significance of threshold spaces. Step into any cathedral and you'll immediately feel it. That sense of entering somewhere different, somewhere set apart from the ordinary world. But it's not just the destination that matters. It's the journey through carefully designed transitional spaces that prepares the soul for what lies ahead. Consider the narthex of a Gothic cathedral, that entrance hall where visitors first arrive. This isn't merely a waiting area, it's a decompression chamber for the spirit. Here, the sounds of the busy world still echo faintly, but they're muffled by stone walls and high ceilings. Light filters in differently, often tinted by stained glass, casting colored shadows that dance across worn stone floors. The air itself feels different, cooler, quieter, heavy with the accumulated prayers of centuries. Buddhist temples employ similar principles with their entrance courtyards and gardens. Before reaching the main hall, visitors pass through carefully designed spaces that gradually shift consciousness from worldly concerns to spiritual contemplation. The sound of water features, the sight of raked gravel or carefully placed stones, the gradual transition from bright outdoor light to dimmer interior spaces, all work together to create a journey of transformation. Japanese torii gates represent perhaps the purest expression of sacred threshold marking. These simple structures, often vermilion red against green landscape, serve no practical purpose except to mark transition. Walking beneath a torii, you're crossing from the ordinary world into sacred space. The gate itself exists only to acknowledge this crossing, to make visible and conscious what might otherwise pass unnoticed. Islamic architecture employs the concept of the muqarnas, those intricate honeycomb-like vaulted ceilings often found in entrance halls and transitional spaces. Standing beneath a muqarnas ceiling, looking up at its impossible complexity of geometric patterns, visitors experience a kind of visual meditation that shifts consciousness away from mundane concerns toward contemplation of divine order and beauty. The great pilgrimage routes of the world are essentially extended liminal spaces, pathways that exist specifically for transformation. The Camino de Santiago in Spain stretches for hundreds of miles, taking pilgrims through landscapes that serve no purpose except to facilitate inner journey. Each day's walk brings subtle changes in terrain, weather, and mood, while the rhythm of walking itself becomes a form of moving meditation. Monastery cloisters represent another fascinating approach to sacred liminal space. These covered walkways around central courtyards serve as spaces for contemplative walking, neither fully inside nor outside, neither completely private nor entirely communal. Monks have walked these corridors for centuries, their footsteps wearing smooth paths in stone, while their minds followed parallel paths toward transcendence. Native American sweat lodges create temporary liminal spaces through ritual and environment. Participants enter small, enclosed structures where intense heat and darkness strip away normal sensory reference points. In this threshold space between comfort and challenge, between individual and communal experience, profound spiritual insights often emerge. The Hindu concept of the mandapa, the pillared hall that precedes the inner sanctum of a temple, serves as a gathering space that's neither fully secular nor completely sacred. Here, community meets divinity, preparation meets destination. Human scale gradually gives way to divine proportion as visitors move deeper into the temple complex. Even modern interfaith spaces recognize the importance of threshold design. Airport chapels, hospital meditation rooms, and university spiritual centers often employ similar principles. Neutral color palettes, soft lighting, minimal but meaningful decoration, creating spaces that feel separate from their surroundings without belonging to any particular tradition. What unites all these diverse approaches is the recognition that transformation requires transition. Sacred spaces aren't meant to be entered casually or accidentally. They require passage through intermediate zones that prepare consciousness for what lies ahead. These liminal spaces serve as bridges between ordinary awareness and whatever transcendent experience awaits beyond. The psychology behind this is profound. Research shows that environmental cues strongly influence mental states, and gradual transitions are more effective than abrupt changes in shifting consciousness. Ancient architects and spiritual leaders understood this intuitively, designing elaborate sequences of transitional spaces that guide visitors through predictable stages of mental and emotional preparation. Modern architects and designers have become masters of the liminal, creating spaces that exist specifically to facilitate transition and transformation. Think about the last time you walked through a grand hotel lobby, that moment when you stepped from the busy street into cool, marble-floored vastness. The ceiling soared above you, perhaps adorned with chandeliers that cast gentle light across seating areas arranged like islands in an ocean of polished stone. This wasn't just a waiting area. It was a carefully orchestrated pause in your journey, a space designed to shift your mental state from traveler to guest. Airport terminals represent perhaps the most complex liminal spaces in modern architecture. These vast structures exist solely to facilitate transition, from ground to air, from one place to another, from departure to arrival. Walking through an airport, you're constantly moving through different zones of experience. The busy check-in areas with their sense of purposeful urgency, the security checkpoints that mark the passage from public to restricted space, and finally, the gates themselves. Those threshold areas where you wait suspended between departure and destination. The psychology of airport design is fascinating. Designers use lighting, color, and spatial flow to guide travelers through emotional states. Departure areas often feature bright, energizing light and upward-moving architectural elements that unconsciously suggest ascension and journey. Arrival areas typically use warmer, more welcoming tones and horizontal lines that suggest stability and homecoming. Shopping mall design employs similar principles, but with different goals. The grand atriums and wide corridors aren't just for foot traffic. They're designed to create a sense of escape from ordinary concerns. The controlled lighting that never quite matches natural daylight, the carefully curated soundscape of fountains and soft music, the way stores open onto these central spaces like rooms in a grand house, all work together to create an environment that feels both familiar and otherworldly. Consider the genius of escalators in these spaces. These moving stairs serve a purely practical purpose, but they also create moments of forced pause and transition. Riding an escalator, you're temporarily suspended between floors, neither here nor there, with time to observe your surroundings from a unique perspective. Retailers understand this, often placing their most attractive displays in sight lines from escalators. Modern office buildings employ liminal design principles in their lobbies and elevator areas. These spaces serve as decompression zones between home life and work life, public street, and private workplace. The best office lobbies feel neither residential nor fully commercial. They occupy a carefully designed middle ground that acknowledges the psychological transition workers experience when arriving at their workplace. University buildings, particularly libraries and student centers, often feature extensive liminal spaces. Study areas that aren't quite reading rooms, social zones that aren't quite lounges, and transitional areas that seem designed for the kind of contemplative wandering that academic life requires. These spaces recognize that learning happens not just in classrooms, but in the thoughtful pauses between formal instruction. Hospital design has evolved to recognize the importance of liminal spaces in healing environments. Modern medical facilities feature extensive lobbies, garden courtyards, and transitional areas that help patients and families adjust to the emotional intensity of medical care. These spaces serve as buffers between the anxiety of arrival and the vulnerability of treatment, providing places for emotional processing and psychological preparation. The most sophisticated contemporary architects understand that liminal spaces aren't just transitional. They're destinations in themselves. Some of the world's most beloved public spaces exist purely to facilitate pausing, wandering, and contemplation. Grand Central Terminal in New York, for example, serves its transportation function while also providing one of the city's most magnificent gathering spaces, where thousands of people daily experience a few moments of architectural transcendence in the midst of urban rush. Retail designers have learned to create third spaces, environments that feel neither fully commercial nor entirely public. Successful bookstore cafes, flagship stores with lounging areas, and shopping centers with community gathering spaces all recognize that people crave environments where they can exist without specific purpose, where browsing and lingering are not just tolerated but encouraged. The rise of carking spaces represents another evolution in liminal design. These environments must feel professional enough for serious work, while remaining informal enough to encourage the kind of creative collaboration that traditional offices often stifle. The best co-working spaces achieve this through careful attention to lighting, furniture selection, and spatial flow that supports both focused individual work and spontaneous interaction. Even residential architecture has embraced liminal principles. Modern homes often feature extensive transitional spaces. Entrance halls, mudrooms, screened porches, and outdoor rooms that blur the boundaries between inside and outside, private and semi-public. These spaces acknowledge that home life, like all life, benefits from thoughtful transitions and moments of pause. There's something profoundly moving about walking through an abandoned shopping mall. The fountain in the center court still works, somehow, its gentle splashing echoing through empty corridors where thousands once walked. Storefronts stand vacant behind security gates, their dark windows reflecting the fluorescent lights that continue to burn overhead. As if the building itself refuses to acknowledge its abandonment. These spaces, once alive with commerce and conversation, now exist in a kind of suspended animation that touches something deep in the human psyche. Abandoned places represent liminal spaces in their purest form. They exist between past and future, between purpose and emptiness, between memory and forgetting. They're spaces that once had clear function and identity, but now occupy an uncertain middle ground. Not quite ruins, not yet forgotten, but something altogether more complex and psychologically compelling. The phenomenon of abandoned malls has become particularly fascinating to photographers, urban explorers, and social scientists. These vast complexes, designed to feel eternal in their prosperity, now stand as monuments to the temporary nature of all human endeavors. Walking through them, visitors often report a strange combination of sadness and peace, nostalgia and optimism, emotions that seem perfectly suited to liminal space experience. Consider an abandoned school building. Empty hallways that once rang with the sounds of learning and friendship now echo only with your footsteps. Lockers stand in silent rows, some still bearing faded stickers and combination locks that will never be opened again. Classrooms maintain their basic structure. Chalkboards, desks arranged in neat rows, windows that still frame the same views they always did. But the life that gave them meaning has moved on. These spaces often become accidentally beautiful in their abandonment. Nature begins to reclaim them slowly. Vines creeping through broken windows, moss growing in corners where moisture collects, birds nesting in the eaves of buildings that once excluded the natural world entirely. This gradual return to wildness creates a unique aesthetic that many find deeply moving. Abandoned hospitals carry their own particular emotional weight. These spaces, designed for healing and hope, seem to retain some echo of their former purpose, even in emptiness. Former patient rooms with their remnant medical equipment, nurses' stations with outdated computer terminals still glowing, waiting areas with magazines from years past, all create a powerful sense of interrupted time, of stories left unfinished. The psychology behind our fascination with abandoned places is complex. Some researchers suggest these spaces trigger what's called temporal displacement, a feeling of existing outside normal time that can be both unsettling and liberating. Others point to the way abandoned places satisfy our curiosity about hidden or forbidden spaces, offering glimpses into worlds that were once private or restricted. Abandoned amusement parks hold particular fascination, perhaps because they represent the abandonment of joy itself. Roller coasters standing silent against the sky, carousel horses frozen mid-gallop, game booths with prizes still hanging from their hooks. These spaces embody the transformation of celebration into memory, of community gathering into solitary contemplation. Urban decay has inspired entire artistic movements. Photographers like Camilo José Vergara and James Griffione have spent decades documenting the slow transformation of abandoned urban spaces, finding beauty in deterioration and hope in nature's patient reclamation of human-built environments. Their work reveals how abandoned spaces can become canvases for unintended art, as weather and time create patterns and textures that no human designer could have planned. The concept of ruin value suggests that abandoned places achieve a kind of aesthetic perfection through their decay. Unlike intact buildings, which can only be what they were designed to be, ruins become whatever our imagination allows them to be. They invite projection and interpretation in ways that functional spaces never can. Some abandoned places achieve a kind of cultural immortality through their emptiness. Pripyat, the abandoned city near Chernobyl, has become one of the world's most famous liminal spaces, a place where ordinary life was interrupted so suddenly that it remains preserved like a snapshot of a moment in 1986. The empty apartment buildings, the abandoned amusement park, the school with its scattered textbooks and toys, all create a powerful meditation on the fragility of human civilization. The internet age has created new forms of abandoned space appreciation. Online communities dedicated to urban exploration share photographs and stories from abandoned places worldwide, creating virtual pilgrimages to spaces that most people will never physically visit. These digital archives preserve the memory of abandoned places, even as the spaces themselves continue to deteriorate. What's remarkable about abandoned places is how they can shift our perspective on the spaces we do inhabit. After walking through an empty mall, a functional shopping center might seem almost miraculous in its bustling purposefulness. After exploring an abandoned school, a working classroom feels charged with life and possibility. Abandoned spaces remind us not to take the vitality of functional spaces for granted. In our hyperconnected age, we've created entirely new categories of liminal spaces that exist only in the digital realm. Picture this. You're waiting for a video call to connect, staring at your own face reflected back from the screen, while that familiar waiting for other participants message hovers nearby. In this moment, you exist in a uniquely modern form of threshold space. Connected but not yet engaged, present but not quite arrived, ready but still waiting. Loading screens represent perhaps the purest form of digital liminal space. These brief interludes between clicking and arriving have become unavoidable features of digital life, creating millions of tiny moments of suspension and anticipation throughout our days. The most thoughtful interface designers understand that these waiting moments need their own aesthetic and psychology. Hence the proliferation of elegant progress bars, amusing animations, and gentle color transitions that make waiting feel less like interruption and more like anticipation. The 404 error page has evolved into an art form precisely because it represents such a perfect digital liminal space. These pages exist to tell us that we've arrived nowhere, that the destination we sought doesn't exist or has moved beyond our reach. But the best 404 pages transform this moment of digital disappointment into something playful or beautiful, acknowledging that even failed journeys can have their own value. Email exists in a constant state of liminality. Your inbox represents a space between private and public, between past and present, between intention and action. Unread emails hover in potential energy, waiting to be transformed from possibility into experience through the simple act of opening. The ritual of checking email involves entering this liminal space repeatedly throughout our days, briefly inhabiting the threshold between what we know and what we might learn. Social media platforms are fundamentally liminal environments. Scrolling through feeds, we exist in a continuous present that's neither fully here nor there. We're simultaneously alone in our physical spaces and connected to hundreds or thousands of others through our screens. This creates a unique form of social liminality. Present but not present, connected but isolated, engaged but passive. The waiting rooms of digital life have their own distinct characteristics. Zoom waiting rooms, online queue systems, and temporary chat rooms all create spaces that exist purely for transition. These digital antechambers serve psychological functions similar to their physical counterparts. They provide time for mental preparation and emotional adjustment before engaging with the main event. Video calls themselves occupy fascinating liminal territory. During a video conference, participants exist simultaneously in their individual physical spaces and in a shared virtual space that has no actual location. This dual existence creates a unique form of presence that feels both intimate and distant, immediate and mediated. The slight delays in video calls, the pixelated freeze frames, the occasional audio dropouts, all serve to remind us that we're existing in a threshold space between physical and virtual presence. Online forums and comment sections create textual liminal spaces where conversations unfold across time and geography. A comment thread might span days or weeks, with participants dropping in and out of the discussion like travelers pausing at a roadside cafe. These spaces exist between writing and conversation, between public and private communication, between formal and informal discourse. Dating apps have created entirely new forms of romantic liminality. The space between matching and meeting, between online persona and physical presence, represents a uniquely modern form of threshold experience. Profile browsing exists in a realm of infinite potential where every swipe might lead to love, friendship, or disappointment. A digital manifestation of the age-old human experience of standing at the threshold of possibility. The phenomenon of ghost towns in virtual worlds, abandoned online spaces where digital communities once thrived, mirrors the abandoned physical spaces we explored earlier. Defunct social media platforms, empty chat rooms, and obsolete websites create a form of digital archaeology, where the remnants of past online lives persist long after their creators have moved on. Streaming services have created new forms of temporal liminality through their endless queues of potential entertainment. The watch later list becomes a space of perpetual deferral, while recommendation algorithms create personalized liminal spaces where familiar and unfamiliar content intermingle in supposedly perfect proportions. The concept of digital detox has emerged precisely because our lives have become so thoroughly infused with liminal digital spaces. The constant availability of connection means we're always potentially on the threshold of engagement. Notifications creating tiny moments of transition between focused work and responsive reaction, between present moment awareness and virtual presence. Online shopping carts represent consumer liminality, spaces where potential purchases accumulate without commitment, where desire meets hesitation, where the gap between wanting and having can be maintained indefinitely. The psychology of cart abandonment reflects our complex relationship with these commercial threshold spaces. Cloud storage creates invisible liminal spaces where our digital lives exist in a state of suspended accessibility. Files uploaded to the cloud hover in a realm between local and remote, present and absent, secure and vulnerable. We trust these invisible spaces with our most important digital possessions, while rarely contemplating their actual physical existence in server farms across the globe. The emergence of virtual and augmented reality technologies promises to create even more sophisticated forms of digital liminality. These immersive environments deliberately blur the boundaries between physical and virtual presence, creating threshold experiences that our psychological and social systems are still learning to process and integrate. Neuroscientists have discovered something fascinating about how our brains process liminal spaces. They activate multiple neural networks simultaneously, creating a unique pattern of brain activity that helps explain why these environments feel so psychologically distinctive. When you walk into an empty parking garage at dusk, your brain's spatial navigation systems, emotional processing centers, and memory networks all light up in patterns that rarely occur in more clearly defined environments. The amygdala, our brain's alarm system, shows particularly interesting activity in liminal spaces. Rather than triggering full fight or flight responses, these environments often produce what researchers call relaxed vigilance, a state where we remain alert to potential changes or discoveries without feeling actively threatened. This might explain why liminal spaces can feel simultaneously calming and slightly unsettling, familiar yet strange. Studies using fMRI brain imaging have revealed that people in transitional environments show increased activity in the default mode network, the brain regions most active during rest and introspection. This suggests that liminal spaces naturally promote the kind of mental state associated with creativity, self-reflection, and psychological processing. It's as if these environments automatically shift our brains into a more contemplative mode. The concept of soft fascination helps explain why certain liminal spaces feel so restorative. Unlike hard fascination that demands focused attention, like watching an exciting movie or playing a video game, soft fascination allows the mind to wander while maintaining gentle engagement with the environment. Empty beaches at dawn, quiet library corridors, and misty forest paths all provide this type of gentle mental stimulation that researchers have found particularly effective for reducing mental fatigue and promoting psychological well-being. Environmental psychologists have identified specific design elements that contribute to the liminal effect. Transitional lighting, neither fully bright nor completely dim, appears to be crucial. Spaces with gradual changes in illumination, whether from windows that filter natural light or carefully designed artificial lighting systems, consistently produce stronger liminal experiences than environments with uniform brightness. The role of sound in creating liminal experiences is equally important. Researchers have found that environments with gentle, consistent background noise, the hum of air conditioning, distant traffic, or quiet water features, promote the relaxed alertness characteristic of liminal states. Complete silence can feel threatening, while loud or variable sounds prevent the contemplative mental state that liminal spaces typically induce. Temporal perception changes dramatically in liminal environments. Studies show that people consistently underestimate time passage when in transitional spaces, suggesting that these environments alter our normal relationship with time's flow. This time dilation effect might explain why brief encounters with liminal spaces often feel more significant and memorable than their actual duration would suggest. The phenomenon of environmental nostalgia provides another lens for understanding liminal space psychology. Researchers have found that certain environmental characteristics, particular types of lighting, spatial proportions, and material textures, can trigger nostalgic responses even in people who have never experienced those specific environments before. This suggests that our brains may be evolutionarily primed to respond emotionally to certain types of transitional spaces. Cultural neuroscience research reveals interesting variations in how different populations respond to liminal environments. People raised in urban environments show different neural activation patterns in natural liminal spaces compared to those raised in rural settings. Similarly, cultural background influences whether certain types of transitional spaces feel comforting or unsettling, suggesting that our responses to liminality are shaped by both universal human psychology and specific cultural learning. The study of place attachment helps explain why some liminal spaces feel welcoming while others feel alienating. Researchers have identified key factors that influence whether people develop positive emotional connections to transitional environments. Accessibility, safety, aesthetic appeal, and the presence of other people all play crucial roles in determining whether a liminal space feels inviting or intimidating. Circadian rhythm research has revealed that our responses to liminal environments change throughout the day. The same space might feel energizing in the morning, contemplative in the afternoon, and mysterious in the evening, as our brain's arousal and attention systems fluctuate with natural biological rhythms. This helps explain why transitional spaces like hotel lobbies are designed to feel appropriate across different times of day. Studies of healing environments have shown that liminal spaces play crucial roles in recovery from illness and trauma. Hospital gardens, meditation rooms, and thoughtfully designed waiting areas all provide the kind of gentle environmental stimulation that promotes psychological processing and emotional regulation. The key appears to be creating spaces that feel separate from stressful environments without being completely isolated from human activity. The emerging field of neuroarchitecture applies neuroscientific findings to building design, with particular attention to creating effective transitional spaces. Architects now work with neuroscientists to design environments that optimize brain function for specific activities, creating entrance areas that promote calm alertness, circulation spaces that encourage creative thinking, and transition zones that help people shift mental states as they move between different activities. Research on environmental psychology has identified the concept of restoration as central to why we seek out liminal spaces. These environments provide what researchers call micro-restorative experiences, brief encounters with calming stimuli that help reset our psychological state, without requiring the time commitment of longer restorative activities like vacation or meditation retreats. As the sun sets over endless suburban streets, something magical happens to the most ordinary places. Parking lots transform into vast stages lit by towering light poles, their yellow glow creating pools of warmth against the approaching darkness. Empty playgrounds take on an almost ethereal quality, their colorful equipment standing like sculptures in a gallery of memory. Strip mall storefronts, banal in daylight, become mysterious theater sets where fluorescent light spills onto empty sidewalks like spotlights awaiting unseen performers. These everyday liminal spaces form the backdrop of contemporary life, yet they possess a poetry that most of us rarely pause to notice. The 24-hour diner at 2 a.m., with its bright windows casting rectangles of light onto empty streets, becomes a beacon of human presence in the quiet hours. The airport parking garage at dawn, with its concrete levels disappearing into morning mist, feels like a monument to modern nomadism. The hospital waiting room at midnight, with its gentle lighting and hushed conversations, holds the hopes and fears of countless families in its carefully neutral embrace. Shopping center parking lots represent perhaps the most underappreciated liminal spaces in American culture. During busy shopping hours, these vast asphalt plains serve purely functional purposes, temporary storage for vehicles while their owners conduct business. But visit one during off hours, and you'll discover something approaching the sublime. The geometric patterns of painted parking spaces stretch toward horizons defined by distant storefronts, while light poles stand like mechanical trees in an urban forest of consumption. The psychology of suburban liminal spaces differs significantly from their urban or natural counterparts. These environments were designed primarily for efficiency and economy rather than beauty or contemplation. Yet they often achieve accidental profundity through their very ordinariness. There's something deeply democratic about a strip mall parking lot. It belongs to everyone and no one, requiring no special knowledge or cultural capital to appreciate. Gas stations occupy a special place in the suburban liminal landscape. These way stations of modern life exist specifically to facilitate transition, providing fuel and supplies for journeys while creating brief pauses in travel. The ritual of filling a tank becomes a moment of enforced stillness, an opportunity to observe surroundings that most people pass through without noticing. At night, a well-lit gas station becomes an island of activity in seas of suburban quiet. Public libraries, particularly their parking lots and entrance areas, create uniquely American liminal spaces where commerce and culture, public and private, intersect. These buildings often stand as the most architecturally ambitious structures in suburban landscapes, their entrance areas designed to feel both welcoming and important. The transition from parking lot to library often involves passing through carefully landscaped areas that signal the shift from everyday concerns to intellectual pursuit. School parking lots after hours take on particularly poignant liminal qualities. These spaces, so full of energy and purpose during the school day, become contemplative expanses in the evening and weekend hours. Basketball courts with their precise line markings become abstract art installations, while empty playgrounds suggest endless stories of childhood friendship and conflict. Fast food restaurants, especially those with late-night hours, serve as accidental community centers in suburban landscapes. Their parking lots become impromptu gathering spaces for teenagers, shift workers taking breaks, and travelers needing brief respites. The fluorescent lighting that makes these spaces feel harsh during busy hours can create surprisingly intimate atmospheres during quieter moments. Highway rest stops represent intentionally designed suburban liminal spaces. These facilities exist purely to serve transitional needs, providing restrooms, food, and brief escape from the monotony of long-distance travel. The best rest stops achieve a kind of anonymous hospitality, creating spaces that feel welcoming without being personal, comfortable without being domestic. Office parks after hours reveal the poetry hidden in corporate landscape design. During business hours, these complexes buzz with purposeful activity, but in the evening they become quiet neighborhoods of darkened windows and empty parking lots. The carefully maintained landscaping, the geometric arrangement of buildings, the way artificial lighting interacts with architectural forms, all create accidentally beautiful compositions that few people ever pause to appreciate. Suburban bus stops and transit areas create small-scale liminal spaces within the larger suburban landscape. These simple structures, often just a bench and a shelter, mark points of transition between private automobile transportation and public transit. They're designed to be temporary stopping points, but they often become impromptu social spaces where people from different parts of the community briefly intersect. The phenomenon of dead malls, shopping centers that have lost most of their anchor stores and foot traffic, represents suburban liminal spaces in transition. These partially occupied complexes exist in a state between their commercial past and uncertain futures. The remaining stores operate like isolated islands in vast spaces designed for much higher levels of activity, creating haunting landscapes of economic change. Community college campuses often exemplify suburban liminal design at its most thoughtful. These institutions serve diverse populations with varying schedules, requiring spaces that can accommodate everything from teenage recent high school graduates to older adults returning to education. The result is often architecture that feels neither fully academic nor completely commercial, creating genuinely inclusive transitional environments. Suburban hotels and motels, particularly their exterior spaces, embody the aesthetics of temporary residence. Parking lots designed for travelers, swimming pool areas that serve no one local community, and landscaping maintained for strangers rather than residents. These spaces exist specifically to provide brief comfort for people in transition between other places. Throughout art history, certain artists have possessed an almost supernatural ability to capture the essence of liminal spaces. Those threshold moments and in-between places that most of us experience but struggle to articulate. These artists serve as translators of the ineffable, helping us understand why a nearly empty diner at 3 a.m. can feel so profound, or why an abandoned parking lot can inspire both melancholy and wonder. Edward Hopper stands as perhaps the greatest master of liminal space in American art. His paintings capture moments of suspension. A woman reading by a hotel window, customers isolated in the bright fluorescent glow of a late-night restaurant, a lone figure in an empty office building. Hopper understood that modern urban life is largely composed of these transitional moments, these pauses between one place and another, one activity and the next. His painting Nighthawks has become iconic precisely because it so perfectly captures the liminal quality of urban nighttime. The way bright interior spaces become islands of human presence in darker, surrounding environments. The genius of Hopper's work lies in his ability to find profound loneliness and beauty in the most ordinary transitional spaces. His diners, hotel rooms, and office buildings aren't depicted as inherently meaningful places, but his treatment transforms them into stages for psychological drama. The way light falls across empty surfaces, the careful positioning of isolated figures, the sense of stories interrupted rather than stories told, all combine to create visual poems about the spaces between destinations. Contemporary photographer Stephen Shore has spent decades documenting the liminal landscapes of American suburbia with similar insight. His images of parking lots, hotel rooms, and roadside restaurants transform everyday transitional spaces into subjects worthy of gallery walls. Shore's photographs reveal the unexpected formal beauty hidden in spaces designed purely for function. The way afternoon light transforms a strip mall parking lot into a geometric composition, or how the arrangement of furniture in a motel room can suggest entire narratives about travel and temporary residence. Andreas Gursky's large-scale photographs of airports, shopping centers, and other contemporary transitional spaces reveal the sublime qualities hidden within mass-produced environments. His images often show these spaces from elevated perspectives that emphasize their pattern and scale, transforming functional architecture into abstract compositions that speak to the collective nature of modern transitional experience. The filmmaker Wong Kar-wai has become renowned for his ability to capture temporal liminality, those moments between definitive events when characters exist in states of emotional suspension. His films often take place in hotels, airports, and other transitional spaces, but more importantly, they occur during transitional times in his characters' lives. The way he uses these environments as metaphors for internal states demonstrates cinema's unique ability to make liminal experience visible and emotionally accessible. Hiroshi Sugimoto's photographs of empty movie theaters capture the essence of architectural liminality. These images show ornate theater interiors with their screens glowing white from long exposures that capture entire film screenings as single points of light. The result transforms these entertainment spaces into meditation chambers, revealing the contemplative potential hidden within environments designed for collective distraction. Street photographers like Vivian Mayer and Joel Meyerowitz have built careers around capturing spontaneous liminal moments in urban environments. Their images often show people in transitional states, waiting for buses, walking between destinations, pausing in doorways. These photographers understand that some of life's most authentic moments occur not during planned activities, but in the spaces between them. The rise of liminal space photography as an internet phenomenon has democratized the artistic documentation of transitional environments. Online communities dedicated to sharing images of empty swimming pools, abandoned malls, and fluorescent-lit corridors have created new aesthetic categories around the uncanny beauty of everyday transitional spaces. These grassroots artistic movements suggest a widespread hunger for acknowledgement of environments that our culture often overlooks. Installation artists have created powerful works that transform gallery spaces into liminal environments. Felix Gonzalez Torres's candy spills and light string installations created transitional experiences within traditional art spaces, while artists like James Turrell have spent decades creating installations that exist purely to facilitate contemplative experiences of light, space, and time. The concept of ruin porn, photography that finds beauty in abandoned and decaying spaces, has become both celebrated and controversial within contemporary art circles. While critics argue that such images can romanticize urban decay and economic decline, supporters suggest that these works help us process the emotional reality of change and loss in our built environments. David Lynch's films and photography demonstrate how liminal spaces can be used to create psychological unease and surreal beauty simultaneously. His images of suburban streets, industrial landscapes, and empty rooms often feel charged with potential energy, as if something significant is about to happen or has just occurred. Lynch understands that transitional spaces naturally amplify emotional states, making them perfect settings for exploring the mysterious aspects of ordinary experience. The Japanese concept of mono no aware, often translated as the pathos of things, finds particular expression in artistic representations of liminal spaces. Japanese artists and photographers often capture the melancholy beauty of transitional moments with exceptional sensitivity, recognizing that awareness of impermanence can enhance rather than diminish our appreciation of present experience. Contemporary video artists have found new ways to explore temporal liminality through time-lapse and slow-motion techniques. Artists like Bill Viola create installations where ordinary actions are stretched or compressed in time, revealing the liminal qualities hidden within everyday movements and transitions. The emergence of virtual and augmented reality as artistic mediums has created entirely new possibilities for creating and experiencing liminal spaces. Artists can now design impossible architectures and transitional experiences that exist only in digital space, while also using technology to enhance our perception of physical liminal environments. Photography books dedicated to specific types of liminal spaces, abandoned amusement parks, empty swimming pools, closed shopping malls, have become their own art form, creating contemplative journeys through environments that most people encounter only briefly or accidentally. These collections serve as atlases of overlooked beauty, guides to finding transcendence in the most unlikely places. Nature is the original creator of liminal spaces, crafting transitional environments and moments that have inspired human contemplation for millennia. Stand in a forest clearing at dawn, and you'll experience one of the planet's most perfect threshold moments. When night hasn't quite surrendered to day, when the air holds both coolness and the promise of warmth, when wildlife moves through that magical hour that photographers call the golden time. Beaches represent perhaps nature's most accessible liminal environments. Here, solid meets liquid in a boundary that shifts with every wave and tide. The edge of the ocean exists in constant motion, creating a space that's never quite the same from moment to moment. Walking along a shoreline, you're following a line that exists between certainties, between the solid reliability of land and the fluid mystery of the sea. The sound of waves creates a natural white noise that promotes contemplation, while the horizon stretches into infinite possibility. The psychology of beach walking involves more than simple relaxation. Research shows that the rhythmic sound of waves naturally synchronizes brain waves, promoting the kind of meditative mental states associated with creativity and emotional processing. The negative ions generated by breaking waves may also contribute to improved mood and reduced stress levels, suggesting that beaches provide both psychological and physiological benefits. Tidal pools create miniature worlds that exist in the ultimate liminal state, sometimes submerged, sometimes exposed, always changing with the rhythm of the tides. These small ecosystems exist at the boundary between terrestrial and marine environments, hosting creatures that have adapted to live in spaces that are neither fully land nor fully sea. Observing a tidal pool requires patience and quiet attention, qualities that these threshold environments naturally encourage. Forest clearings possess their own magic, creating natural rooms within the larger woodland. These open spaces often occur where fallen trees have created temporary gaps in the canopy, allowing sunlight to reach the forest floor and create conditions for different plant communities. Standing in a forest clearing feels like discovering a secret chamber in nature's cathedral, a space set apart from the surrounding woods, yet intimately connected to them. Meadows represent transitional spaces between forest and field, often existing in areas where human activity or natural disturbance has prevented full forest growth. These grassland spaces change dramatically with seasons. Vibrant with wildflowers in spring, heavy with seed heads in late summer, stark and sculptural under winter snow. Each seasonal transformation reveals different aspects of the meadow's character, while maintaining its essential identity as a space between other landscapes. The edges of water bodies, lakeshores, riverbanks, and stream margins create linear liminal spaces that often serve as wildlife corridors and human contemplation paths. These riparian zones exist in constant dialogue between land and water, supporting unique plant and animal communities, while providing some of nature's most restorative environments for human visitors. The sound of moving water, whether gentle stream babbling or powerful river rushing, creates natural soundscapes that promote psychological calm and introspection. Mountain passes and ridge lines offer elevated liminal experiences where Earth meets sky in dramatic fashion. Standing on a mountain ridge, you exist in a space between valleys, between weather systems, between the terrestrial world below and the atmospheric realm above. These high-altitude threshold spaces often provide the clarity of perspective, both literal and metaphorical. That has made them destinations for spiritual seeking across cultures. Cave entrances create some of nature's most dramatic threshold experiences. The transition from bright exterior light to dim interior darkness involves more than visual adjustment. It represents a journey from the known outdoor world to hidden underground realms. Cave entrances often maintain temperatures that differ significantly from outside air, creating microclimates that feel distinct from both surface and deep cave environments. Seasonal transitions create temporal liminal experiences that affect entire landscapes. The period between seasons, those weeks when winter hasn't quite released its grip, but spring is beginning to assert itself, transforms familiar environments into places that seem to exist outside normal time. Early spring forests, with their bare trees beginning to bud and forest floors showing the first green shoots, embody the essence of natural transition. Wetlands represent complex liminal ecosystems that exist between terrestrial and aquatic environments. Marshes, swamps, and bogs create landscapes that are neither fully land nor entirely water, supporting unique communities of plants and animals adapted to fluctuating water levels and changing seasonal conditions. These environments often feel mysterious and primordial, connected to ancient landscapes that predate human influence. The phenomenon of edge effect in ecology describes how the boundaries between different habitat types often support greater biodiversity than either habitat alone. These ecological edges, where forest meets meadow, where fresh water meets salt water, where different plant communities intersect, serve as natural laboratories for adaptation and evolution while providing rich environments for wildlife observation. Morning mist and fog create temporary liminal experiences that transform familiar landscapes into mysterious dreamscapes. When fog settles over a lake or mist rises from a warming forest floor, it creates visual boundaries that obscure normal reference points while revealing new patterns and relationships in the landscape. These meteorological events turn ordinary places into extraordinary threshold experiences. Desert edges, where arid landscapes meet other biomes, create dramatic contrasts that highlight the unique characteristics of each environment. The transition from desert to grassland or from desert to mountains often occurs within relatively short distances, creating natural corridors where travelers can experience multiple ecosystems and observe how life adapts to different environmental conditions. Estuaries represent some of nature's most dynamic liminal spaces, where rivers meet oceans and fresh water gradually blends with salt water. These transitional zones support complex ecosystems that serve as nurseries for many marine species, while also providing crucial habitat for migratory birds. The twice-daily rhythm of tides creates constantly changing conditions that require remarkable adaptability from the plants and animals that call estuaries home. As we reach the end of our journey through the world of liminal spaces, perhaps the most important discovery is this: learning to recognize and appreciate these threshold moments can transform our relationship with daily life. When we begin to see transition as destination, when we find beauty in the spaces between certainties, we open ourselves to a different way of experiencing the world, one that finds meaning in pauses rather than demanding constant progress. The ancient Chinese concept of Wu Wei, often translated as non-action or effortless action, finds its perfect expression in our relationship with liminal spaces. These environments don't ask us to accomplish anything specific. They simply invite us to exist mindfully within their boundaries. A hospital waiting room teaches patience. An empty parking lot at dawn offers perspective. A hotel lobby provides a moment of transition between one phase of a journey and the next. Modern life often feels like a series of destinations connected by necessary but unimportant transitions. We rush through airports to reach our flights, hurry through lobbies to arrive at meetings, speed through corridors to get to our destinations. But what if these transitional spaces aren't just means to ends? What if they're opportunities for the kind of gentle reset that our overstimulated minds desperately need? Research in environmental psychology suggests that brief encounters with liminal spaces throughout our days can provide cumulative benefits for mental health and cognitive function. These micro-moments of transition, pausing in a stairwell to notice light through a window, sitting for an extra moment in a parked car before entering a building, taking a slightly longer route that passes through a peaceful courtyard, can serve as miniature meditation retreats that help maintain psychological balance. The practice of liminal mindfulness involves bringing conscious attention to threshold experiences throughout daily life. This might mean noticing the quality of light in an elevator, appreciating the acoustic properties of an empty hallway, or observing the social dynamics of a waiting room. These small acts of attention can transform routine transitions into opportunities for presence and awareness. Learning to find comfort in uncertainty becomes easier when we understand liminal spaces as natural and necessary parts of human experience. Life itself is fundamentally liminal. We exist in constant transition between past and future, between childhood and adulthood, between one phase of life and another. Accepting this transitional nature of existence can reduce anxiety about change while increasing appreciation for the present moment. The concept of threshold guardians from mythology and psychology suggests that challenges often arise precisely at moments of transition. Learning to navigate liminal spaces, both literal and metaphorical, provides practice for handling these threshold challenges with greater equanimity. The patience required to sit peacefully in a waiting room translates to emotional resilience during life's larger transitions. Creating intentional liminal spaces in our personal environments can provide daily opportunities for contemplation and renewal. This might involve designating a particular chair as a transition space between work and home life, creating a small garden area that serves as a threshold between indoor and outdoor space, or establishing morning and evening rituals that mark transitions between sleep and waking consciousness. The Japanese practice of forest bathing, or shinrin-yoku, demonstrates how intentional engagement with natural liminal spaces can provide therapeutic benefits. This practice involves simply being present in forest environments without specific goals or activities, allowing the transitional quality of woodland spaces to promote psychological restoration and stress reduction. Understanding the psychology of liminal spaces can inform how we design and interact with the built environment. Advocating for better designed transitional spaces in our communities, more thoughtful waiting areas, more beautiful corridors, more contemplative entrance halls, becomes a form of public health advocacy that benefits everyone who uses these shared spaces. The practice of liminal appreciation involves actively seeking out and spending time in threshold spaces as a form of meditation and self-care. This might mean visiting an empty parking garage to appreciate its architectural qualities, sitting in a hotel lobby to observe human interactions, or taking walks through transitional neighborhoods where different communities meet and blend. Perhaps most importantly, learning to find peace in liminal spaces helps us develop comfort with the unknown and uncertain. In a world that often demands quick decisions and immediate answers, the ability to exist peacefully in states of not knowing becomes a valuable life skill. Liminal spaces teach us that some of life's most important experiences happen not when we arrive at destinations, but during the journeys between them. The practice of photography or journaling in liminal spaces can deepen our appreciation for these environments while creating personal archives of threshold experiences. Documenting the quality of light in different transitional spaces, recording observations about how these environments affect mood and thought, or simply collecting images of beautiful threshold moments can create a personal practice that enhances awareness and appreciation. Ultimately, finding peace in liminal spaces is about recognizing that transition itself is a form of destination. When we stop rushing through threshold experiences and begin appreciating them as valuable in their own right, we discover that some of life's most profound moments happen not at clearly defined destinations, but in the gentle spaces between one certainty and the next. Tonight, we've wandered together through the hidden geography of in-between places, from ancient sacred thresholds to modern digital waiting rooms, from misty forest clearings to fluorescent-lit parking lots at midnight. We've discovered that these liminal spaces, these pauses in the rhythm of ordinary life, hold their own quiet magic and serve essential functions for human psychological well-being. Whether created by nature's patient artistry or human design, whether ancient or utterly contemporary, these threshold environments invite us to slow down, to notice, to exist peacefully in states of transition and possibility. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the world of liminal spaces. If you're already drifting off, then our mission is complete. But if you're still awake, perhaps another deep dive through one of our previous episodes will carry you gently into slumber. Until we meet again in these quiet hours, may you find unexpected beauty in every waiting room, peace in every corridor, and wonder in all the gentle spaces that exist between one moment and the next.